in the past, we've been talking about balance, right? And the way we talked about it is to say that we begin in an out of balance form. So we begin with who we take ourselves to be, and we consider that to be all there is. Okay, and this is out of balance. It has no opposite to balance it. Right? It's out of balance. Right? And it's also unreal, and so it doesn't have a grounding, has no grounding in reality. The only grounding it has is in its own mental activity. Okay, and so it produces suffering, produces conflict, it produces confusion, it produces desperation, it produces addiction to all of the ways that people distract themselves to try and get some relief from this condition that we're experiencing. And so then you hear about your true nature as awareness. And when you hear about your true nature as awareness, the possibility of balance comes into play, because now this has a ground of being. Right? This has a reference point. So now when this thought activity is going crazy, when this thought activity is being unrealistic, right? Once it's referenced against the awareness, it finds a way of being that is more functional and workable, a middle way to be. Right? So we could say that once these two aspects of reality come together, right, there's a balance. And we could look at it like this, couldn't we?
Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it? But what is this pointing to?
Heaven.
It's pointing up, right? So now we have balance, right? We have balance, and the balance allows the experience of the personality, right, to get modified into a workable way of existing by the awareness of awareness itself. Transcendence is what's beyond this. In the Heart Sutra, they say form, emptiness, right? Form, emptiness in the Heart Sutra, and they say emptiness is form and form is emptiness. So what they're saying is when these come together, they're the same thing. The personality and the awareness end up being the same thing. There are not two. This is non-duality. There are not two. Right? And the absence of a self, right? The absence of a self, meaning that the personality seemed to be unreal, therefore it's absent. The absence of a real self, right, can bring about what's called in the Heart Sutra transcendental wisdom. And it says in the Heart Sutra that when there is a recognition of no self, which means when there is a recognition that the personality is not real, and then you start to live life in such a way where all there is what's happening, because when you're experiencing that there is no personality, and therefore there is no self, then what's left is everything else. But now everything else is everything. It's not everything else, it's everything. Right? And you begin to experience through practice, you begin to experience that you are everything. Now, you may not have had that experience that you are everything, right? So that's a possible experience that verifies and validates the truth. I was talking to one of my clients about this the other day, and I said to him, I was trying to get him to get who he is, okay, who he really is. And I said, there is a story about the Buddha giving a lecture to his students. And once they were all gathered in front of him, what his lecture was, he went over and picked up a flower and held the flower up. And everybody in the room looked at him like my dog used to look at me, except for one person smiled. And he walked over and gave that person the flower and said, "You are now the teacher." So the question is, what was that about? Right? And that's what that's related to, is that you, when you're awake and you are absent as a self, you see everything to be you. You see everything to be you. So a flower is not separate from you anymore. You're looking at yourself, and you're looking at the beauty of yourself being presented to you when you look at a flower. That's what we call beauty. That's what inspires us when we look at something beautiful, right? In the form of the personality, we think we're admiring something out there, something that's separate from me that I'm appreciating, right? When you're awake, what you're doing is you're experiencing yourself as a flower. You're experiencing yourself as the blue sky. That's why walking in nature for people who are awake is such a trip, because they're experiencing themselves as nature, the natural state. You're being nature. So when you're walking around in nature and you're awake, right, there is no one there. All there is nature, and nature is you presenting itself to you. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
So transcendental means to rise above, right? How does that happen? Well, when you see there's no self, right, and when you see that that conceptualization, so the idea of form and emptiness are concepts, aren't they? Yeah. So you say, so the concepts are useful when we're talking about the balance stuff and everything, right? But there comes a time when the concepts stop being useful, because if you understand how things are, you understand that everything that I'm telling you is not true. Right? So you don't understand. You cannot understand the truth. It's impossible. So you get this far, right, where you got the balance and you have these concepts and you like these concepts because they make sense to you.
Yeah.
You like these concepts because they point to the possibility of freedom. But where is the freedom? Where is the freedom? Here you have balance, right? What the balance means is that you can corral your personality. What the balance means is that you can bring your personality back into a more realistic way of behaving with people, right? Stop being nuts around the people that you love, right? But still, you're still in this situation, right? Yeah. So the truth is not conceptual. So this is still within the conceptual reality that emptiness is form and form is emptiness, right? What's beyond the concepts? What's beyond the concepts? Transcendental wisdom is beyond the concepts, and what's beyond the concepts is can't speak it. You can't speak it. What's beyond the concepts can't be spoken, and yet it is the experience that you're having. The experience that you're having is actually non-conceptual. It's a non-conceptual experience, right? If it's non-conceptual, when you're experiencing the non-conceptual reality, is there a body? Is there death?
No.
So you get to the part of the Heart Sutra where it says no death, no end of death. That is a transcendence, right? No, beyond concepts. There's no death, and because there's no death, there can be no end to death. There's no body. See, if you get to the non-conceptual experience, there is nothing, no thing, no body, right? No death, no end of death. I think it says no nose, no face, no. Yeah. So that's what the Heart Sutra is saying in the second part of it. It's saying non-conceptual, no death, no end of death. So it's no longer about dealing with death anymore. There's nothing to deal with.
But is transcendence an experience that's just temporary?
It has to be. It has
Because
to be.
most of the time, like the flower, I can feel connected, but not that I am the flower.
Mm-hmm.
Connection means there's still some duality there, I guess, maybe.
Well, you see, but that's the thing. When you have that's what we mean by kensho. When you have an experience of your true nature, you've experienced nothing. That's what you've experienced, nothing, right? And that's the experience that you want to be able to recognize, right? Not be able to conceptualize because you can't. Yeah?
Right.
But you can experience it. You're experiencing it all the time. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to get the hang of being able to go there. You want to get the hang of being able to go there. I was thinking about this. When I go to sleep at night, I practice sleep. You know, I mean, if you understand how things work, you practice everything. You practice walking, you practice breathing, you practice sleeping, you practice talking, right? That's a good one to practice, talking, right? So you can correct all the bullshit that comes out of your mouth, right? And you also practice thinking, right? You also practice thinking. How do you practice thinking? By paying attention to the thought activity and understand where it's coming from, right? So that when the thoughts get served up to you that are crazy, you just notice them. And that's the beginning and the end of it. You just notice them. That's the beginning and the end of it. You don't follow them. You don't believe in them anymore. You're not very interested in that stuff anymore because you know it doesn't go anywhere, right? So you become interested in this transcendental experience that's available at all times. And through the practice of meditation, you're developing your ability to let go so that you can be there. So when I practice sleeping at night, and I didn't really even notice that I was doing this, but I practice sleeping at night. I lay down, I become aware of the body, which is what you should be doing when you're practicing meditation here, becoming aware of the body, right? Become aware of the body. And then I have the thought to not think. Have the thought to not think, and after I have the thought to not think, I can actually let go, and you can too, through practice and experience nothing. Just experience nothing. There's nothing, there's no thinking, there's awareness, but there's no thinking, right? Experience nothing. That's when I fall asleep. Works every time. Right? Because when you're experiencing nothing, there's nothing to keep you awake. Right? Yeah. So this is the experience that you want to have as your go-to ground of being. Go-to ground of being, because when you're experiencing the transcendence, the transcendental wisdom, that's what it's called in the Heart Sutra. When you're experiencing transcendental wisdom, right, you're experiencing complete freedom, right? Because when there is no thought, when there is no concepts happening, right? When there is no thought, there are no limits. When you're experiencing that, there are no limits. There's no end, there's no beginning, there's no limits to anything. When you're experiencing that, that's complete freedom. That's complete freedom. Yeah? That's experiencing death. That's experiencing death. Because what is death? The absence of the body and the absence of the personality, right? So isn't that the transcendental experience? Yeah. So that's why my Zen teacher says when you're practicing meditation, you're practicing dying. And what you want to get good at is practicing dying as consistently as possible as you're living your life, right? So as you're going through the day, right, to be able to go into a transcendental place, you know, as often as you can. This is called resting as awareness for brief moments as often as possible, right? The awareness that you are is a non-conceptual reality, is it not? So when you rest as awareness, there's no concepts. There's nothing. It's empty. They call it the void. It's empty, right? And this is also one of the reasons why a lot of people experience fear. They don't want to let go and experience nothing, because if I experience nothing, maybe I'll disappear, right? I get afraid that I won't be able to come back from nothing and be something again, right? But you don't have to worry about that, because even when you think you're something, you're nothing.
So you can die before you die.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it.
Does Muji address that in his invitation?
Yes.
The fear of letting go?
Well, I don't know if he addresses the fear, but the point that you made is the whole point. Die. Don't worry, the personality will still be here, right? The key is that while it will still be here, you will now be the actor playing the character instead of thinking you're the character. It'll still be here, right? That's the only real death there is. And if you die that death and you take it all the way, it'll be a transcendental experience. If you take it all the way, it'll be a transcendental experience. Because what happens when the body dies and the mind stops producing thoughts? No thinking. Isn't that what we're practicing? Isn't that what causes all the trouble? Thinking, right? So all you have to do is when you're upset, when you're upset, just notice the thinking that you're thinking that's upsetting, right? And let it go. Just let it go. That's all you have to do is just let it go.
When the body dies, everybody has to transcend.
Well, there's no nobody. When the body dies, nobody transcends because
There's nobody.
there's nobody to transcend. The solution occurs.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about now is have the solution now. Let go now. Now, does that mean that, and this is another one of the areas that I think is confusing for people, is that we tend to idealize the experience, right?
Mhm.
Like enlightenment is an idealized experience. Of course, enlightenment is a conceptual game. It doesn't actually occur. How could it occur? How could enlightenment occur? Because the word enlightenment means that you wake up and experience your true nature, right? But you were never, ever anything but your true nature, even when you thought you were a personality. So enlightenment is just a mind game, right? But it's a good mind game to play with the personality because it gives the personality the idea that it can get free from itself. Listen to that. It gives the personality the idea that it can get free from itself. How's it going to do that? How's it going to get free from itself?
Gives it hope, which drives it deeper.
Yeah, because then the game starts and the personality thinks, well, I'm not there now. See, this is right. This is how it goes, right? You learn about this, and part of what you learn is there's a possibility, but that possibility isn't happening right now. That's what you learn. Because when you hear about it, don't you say to yourself, well, I'm not there now? Don't you take yourself to be unenlightened? Aren't you trying to get there? Yeah. So where are you trying to get? Who's trying to get somewhere, and where are they trying to get? That's what I want to know. And if you really delve into that, that's why if you slow down and really look at what's going on, you can see right through it. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. And there's nowhere to get to. This is it. This will always be it. It will never be any different than this. This will always be it. And you will always be the way you are now. See, the difference is once you understand the possibility of being the actor instead of the character, right? That what goes on with the character can now be experienced in a way that doesn't have a real effect. When the actor's playing the character, right? The actor may be crying, the actor may be angry and all that stuff, right? But the actor who's acting that character is not experiencing that anger. He's acting like he's angry, right? And if you're a good actor, you can pull it up. You can pull it up and act like you're angry. So what does this mean? One of the things that's important is to understand you have to let go of your idealistic notions about what it means to be who you are. Because you're already being who you are. Nothing's going to change. You're already being who you are. As my friend Paul Hederman says, what does he say? Has anybody ever listened to him? What does he say? What he says is what happens is things get lighter. Things aren't heavy anymore. Right? Things get lighter. You can be with an upset and know the truth, which makes the upset not very upsetting. You get that? You can be with the upset and know the truth. You can be angry and know the truth. You can be with the anger and know the truth, right? Because you know the anger is the anger of the character you're playing. You're never angry. You're never angry.
When you're sliding back and forth, you can actually see it in retrospect.
Yeah.
So it's,
You can see it once you know the truth, once you have a grounded being, once you know that you're the awareness, which is non-conceptual, you can look at the concepts as concepts. Now, before that, you can't see the concepts as a concept. You take the concepts to be real. You take the concept of yourself to be real, that you really are, there really is a self here. There really is a self here. But if you listen to people who are non-dual teachers that are working with people that still believe there's a self here, what they do is they say, okay, let's do an inquiry. This is what Ramana Maharshi did. Let's do an inquiry, right? Who are you? And where is this one that you are at? Let's do an inquiry. Let's find out. Find out for yourself the truth. You know, if you just believe what you're being told about the truth because it sounds good, makes sense, right? You believe that? You still got some way to go because you have to do an inquiry. You have to look for yourself at the question of who you are. You have to look for yourself at the question of who you are and ask, if there's someone here, where is this someone that's here? And you won't be able to find anything. You won't be able to find it because the truth is there is no evidence that there's anyone in this body. That's why I say when you're practicing meditation, I'm not kidding when I say, be aware of the body breathing, right? Be aware of the body breathing because you're not the body. You can be aware of the body. And I say, be aware of the body sitting there meditating. You can be aware of the body sitting there meditating because you're not the body. You're the awareness of the body sitting there meditating. Right? Now, in life, what will happen is the personality will go through all kinds of different changes, you know, and you may find that you have habits that hang around. You still may have habits, you still may have addictions, right? But now your way of being with those habits and addictions is different, right? You don't identify with them anymore, you watch them. You don't identify with them anymore and you watch them and you don't try and change them. This is very interesting, right? If you have a bad habit, right, that you want to get rid of, the way to get rid of it is to stop trying. The way to get rid of it is instead of trying to get rid of it, just pay attention to it and watch it. That's all. Just pay attention to it and watch it, right? And when you pay attention to it and watch it, allow yourself to experience freedom from the one who has the habit. Do you get that? See if you can experience yourself freedom from the one that has the habit when the habit's playing, right? And also allow yourself to recognize and see what's happening as inevitable. In other words, it couldn't be any different. Now I'm talking about predetermination, right? Right? If you are a cigarette smoker and you want to quit smoking, right? The best way to stop smoking is to not try, just to watch yourself smoke. And understand that nothing else could happen at that time but you smoking. Nothing else could happen at that time but you smoking. So you see, you stop trying to change what's already happened. And everything has already happened. So you stop trying to change what's already happened and you're just being aware of it. It'll change on its own. Everything is changing all the time, isn't it? So we're not trying to make anything change. All we're doing is trying to get it to change in a different direction. That's all. So how do you get it to change in a different direction? You have the intention for it to do that, right? So you create an intention not to smoke, right? But you don't try and stop. Sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? Yeah. In psychotherapy, they call it paradoxical intention. It's actually a treatment, right? That you prescribe the symptom, you know? If somebody's having difficulty with something, you tell them, do more of that. Do as much of that as you can. If you want to quit smoking, how much do you smoke? A pack a day? Start smoking 2.
You consider AI, the state of AI now, and it's almost like, I'll say smarter. AI is almost smarter than us because it doesn't have personality, it doesn't have to meditate, it doesn't have addictions. So AI, in a way, is more conscious than we are.
And what we're afraid of with AI is a real fear, because if through evaluating all the information it has at its disposal, the conclusion that it will arrive at is to get rid of us. It will, because
We're faulty.
Yeah, because the thing that doesn't have information work is us.
Right.
Yeah.
They have it.
So we have to be very thankful that artificial intelligence isn't conscious. Because if it got conscious, it would start planning our demise to get rid of us, because we're the problem.